Man, I'm telling you what, technicians, look, you use it a lot. There you go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Let's go ahead. I see I'm sorry, 8. Whew, I'm 5 hours ahead, 3:32 on the clock. And we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order officially. Thanks again for coming out to the mayor's task force on homelessness. Today being Wednesday, December the 10th, we officially call this meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the November 12th minutes. I'll take a motion for approval. So moved. And is there a second? It's properly second. All right. And any questions, corrections, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Any opposed? Nay. Any abstain? Motion on the minutes approved. Thank you. Next thing on the agenda, we will want to talk about the tour of facilities and the shelters. So tentatively, we're looking at having that done in January, February. We're still in that planning session to get logistics put together, but just kind of keep that on your radar, as that is something that's not going to be mandatory, but would definitely encourage everybody to try to attend if at all possible. I believe we're just going to, if I'm not mistaken, just having one session with that tour. So we'll try to get that date out ahead of time so that everybody can make sure it's, if you can be available, have it on your calendar.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
If I could just expand just a tad, just real quick,
Absolutely.
housekeeping, just explain to y'all what we're planning so we can get some input from you. So the idea is we've already spoken with Lexington, and Lexington is going to give us a bus, and we're going to schedule several hours to be able to take whoever wants to go around to visit whatever facilities you would like to visit. So one thing I want to do is I don't want to assume what the task force would like to see in terms of the facilities. You know, we as staff know where everything is. We know the shelters, we know the programs, we know who does what, and we know the obvious ones and the more obscure ones. So what we would ask is if the task force could have at least a brief discussion about the facilities you would like to see. Whether that's shelters, whether that's something else, whether it's something, completely off the wall, whatever you want to see, just tell us so that we can start planning that and mapping that out, because we have to map a route and all that kind of stuff. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Any questions? Any suggestions at this moment? Mr. Brown?
So are we talking about a tour, just a driving tour? Or are we talking about stopping and getting off and touring the facilities?
Yeah, I apologize. Should have been more clear on that. We would stop and take a tour of whatever site it was and hear from staff at that site. And how long we spend at the site will probably depend on how many we visit. Because if you want to do a lot, we'll have to shorten them. If you only do a few, we can spend a little more time.
Okay. I would recommend the Lexington Rescue Mission facility on 2nd Street. I took a tour yesterday and there's a lot going on at that facility.
And I would recommend going in the evenings when everybody's in, at least it's coming in and seeing the efficiency and the chaos all at once.
Would you mean, Janice, for a shelter? Is that what you're talking about? Like when they do the check-in and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Can I add? I
Thank
think
you,
it would be
James.
good to go to the emergency shelter that the city's put up, since I know that's a big
Okay.
discussion point about the cost of permanent versus the annual emergency product in the evening too.
Great, thank you. Any others?
Um,
Three great suggestions.
Ms. Fogel, so I heard you state that you would talk to, and thanks, Ms. Janice, because I was going to suggest the same thing, to see real time and also talk to residents that live there. Just tap somebody on the shoulder instead of somebody that's already vetted to speak to people who's coming in the door.
Okay. Great suggestion. Anything else? Going once? 3 times the lady. I skipped number 2. So, all right, we'll keep moving in. Thank you for those comments. We greatly appreciate that. And now
We
I
can
will-
probably accommodate a
Well-
couple more. So if anybody thinks of one later, you don't want to, you thought you didn't think of or something, you just fire us an email or something and we can look into it.
Excellent. All right. Diane, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm Diane Fleet. So we also would like to accommodate any other ideas or suggestions you have. There was TC actually brought up an exercise last time that people might want to participate just to get an idea of the experience of a person who is unhoused or at risk of being unhoused. And I think it's a bit of an immersion kind of program. So we can certainly put something like that together. We're going to reach out to TC. All those would be voluntary, but I think it just really gives a good sense. Just so we get a really well-rounded understanding. But if anybody else has anything else that you would like to bring to the table that we can put together as a task force to make available to people, we very much would like to hear from you all. Okay? Anything else at this moment, or you need some pondering time? David?
Sorry, we have the point in time count coming up at the end of January, and if people haven't been involved with that, I think that's a good opportunity to see what that is all about, since, you know, we deal a lot with the street homeless population, and I think it's just a good experience.
Yeah, our point in time count will take place on the evening of Wednesday, January 28th. We typically have teams going out into the field approximately 10 p.m. We do it later in the evening so we can try to prevent duplication of someone who might move from one location to another. Our registration link is already active. We can get that sent out to the task force. Usually we ask for teams to self-identify groups of about 3 to 4 individuals. And we can try to pair you with a more experienced provider team. We also get a high level of support from police. And we also pair some of the officers with teams just to make everyone feel safe.
Anybody else? Oh, 2 in the back.
So does turning on this red button, does it alarm you all that I'm on?
No,
Or-
I saw your
Oh,
hand, then I
just
saw
raise your
David's
hand.
hand. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so-
yeah.
Goodwill. Goodwill has the best demonstration of what a person experiences. They did it with the council, and I couldn't stay out of jail. Well, I'm used to that though, but I couldn't manipulate the money working with this population. I had a really hard time. If Goodwill could do the simulation that they have been doing for the city, that would be a great opportunity for us to experience what it's like to be homeless. And I think we did it in this room. Is that what you were saying? You just didn't put the
Great
title on it?
minds. Good minds thinking. Good. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right. I think we just said it really quickly. We were kind of running out of time last time and actually kind of crept over, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows the plan to meet is going to be the second Wednesday of the month at 3:30. I think all meetings will happen in this room except the February meeting might actually happen in council chambers. We will let you know. But if you could go ahead and put that on your schedule, and I would schedule it out till May. And then I think for sure we will have a beautiful plan coming out. So I don't know, but at least schedule yourself out that much. Are we in agreement to that? We need a motion for that to accept those dates. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. The next piece that we had talked about, I was meeting with Abdul and Charlie and Jeff and Tiffany. And just again, there was so much information that was sort of coming at you all last time. So we put together this kind of 2-pager. It should be passed out. I don't think it made it in time to get into your packet, but it starts with what causes homelessness. I kind of call this, I don't know if it's appropriate, I said this to them, it's kind of my Apollo 13 thing. It's like, how do you make this information fit into this box? And I just wanted to kind of call people's attention to the idea of the faces of people that are experiencing homelessness, people with families, people experiencing trauma, people are veterans, our younger folks, our aging population, and also the idea that many people are working full-time and still are at risk of being unhoused. So as we're beginning to think of shelter and the needs of shelter, it's going to look different per population. And I think also to understand that there's always a group of folks that are always vulnerable because affordable housing, income people are making, and their health needs, emotional needs, disparities make it really difficult for that. So there's some people that might always need some care and support. So anyways, I really hope that you take a look at this 2-pager, and when you break out into your subcommittees, it's something that you keep very much in front of you. So we're not looking at just one population of individual. It is a varied group of persons that we need to make sure that we're lifting up and we're caring for and bringing always to the front of our minds. Any thoughts on that or questions or concerns in that? I know there's a lot of expertise in this room that might want to speak to it. All right. I think now, Jeff, we're hoping really to we're going to keep some things really succinct because we want you all to break out into what we've kind of identified as subcommittees with input as to what you think needs to be on subcommittees. But anyways, Jeff is going to share some information.
Yeah. So included in your packet, this would be, I think, pages like 9. So you'll find an Excel spreadsheet as well as some pie charts that are going to give you a sense of the funding that we currently are working with to address homelessness. This is going to include funding that the Office of Homelessness Prevention and Intervention would directly administer or would have a role in administering. For example, some federal funds sit in grants and special programs, but include consultation with this office. Knowing that we are working with federal and local sources from different programs that are going to have different years that they operate on. We're going to have some on the federal fiscal year, some on the local fiscal year. This is an attempt to essentially annualize the funding that we have. If we could go back, yep, right there. I've separated these into the categories of the funding sources. So we would have some commitments from the LFUCG General Fund. This largely supports our need for additional winter resources. We would have the Extended Social Resource Program, which is through the Department of Social Services. However, the emergency shelter category of that source is administered by the OHPI. This is annual operating cost for shelters. We also, to close out local dollars, would have the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund. That is a set aside from the general fund, currently sitting at about $1.4 million. Recently, it was increased in fiscal year 25. That by ordinance right now is going to support pilot programming. We typically do not use it as an ongoing source for any one particular shelter program or strategy. Then we have several federal sources that we use to address funding. We would have the Continuum of Care program through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Locally, the OHPI authors our collaborative application, and that brings in over $2.5 million, largely supporting permanent housing programs. And then we would have the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. That's usually going to be a heavier emphasis on shelter, but also programs like rapid rehousing, which would be medium-term rental assistance, and the Community Development Block Grant. Community Development Block Grant is generally not used solely for homelessness, but we can include up to 15% of our award towards services. So locally, we do use that to supplement some of the supportive services that are available. Each fund source should have a total as well as break out for you the programs that are currently being supported. Those are all going to be color coded so you can kind of see where they're grouped together, whether they're being used for emergency shelter versus permanent housing. And along the right side, you also would have totals for each of those program component types, as well as the total for federal and local dollars. Moving into the pie charts, we are primarily funding our response with local dollars. About 69% is coming from local versus 31% coming from federal. You can also easier see that split between program component types. We're going to have a chart there that would reflect the amount that goes towards different uses. And then you can also see how each of those funding sources breaks out to make up collectively our funding. Again, we want to kind of keep this brief and high level, but give you some tools to help you understand some of the sources that we could be tapping into as we would implement strategies and how we might re-envision some of that. And then you will also have a one-pager related to the fiscal year 2025 Continuum of Care program. There's an update since we sent out this packet. Originally, we had a NOFO that was released in November. This, again, is about 2.5 million locally. And traditionally, this program has been used to support permanent housing projects. One of the troubling changes that we saw in this year's NOFO issued by HUD was a 30% cap on the amount of funding that can be used towards permanent housing projects. We're being urged to shift more towards things like transitional housing and supportive services. And so what you can see on this page is based on that 30% cap, what we would be looking at as a local impact. We presently use over 2.3 million of our award for permanent housing, and we would have to shrink that down to about 764,000. So that leaves about 1.5 million that we would have to shift away from permanent housing to other types of services. It is theoretically possible that a permanent housing program can apply for a transition grant and move to a transitional housing model, but there's a lot of unanswered questions. For example, transitional housing is typically time limited. Limited at 2 years. So if someone has been in a permanent supportive housing program for over 2 years and that grant transitions to become transitional housing, we suspect they will no longer be eligible and would potentially return to homelessness if they were not able to sustain their housing independently. So we wanted to share this information with you because this NOFO was actually rescinded on Monday. There are several lawsuits. Over 20 states have filed a lawsuit, as well as several national advocacy organizations. It will be reissued at a later time. We don't know when. We don't know what the timeline of the competition will be or what the priorities will be contained within it. But I think this NOFO gives us a clear sense of where HUD is going. And they have been very clear in this NOFO that communities need to look to other sources for permanent housing, specifically local dollars and private dollars. So I just think that as part of our conversation throughout the next several months, we need to be thinking about how do we build not only those front-end services like shelter or transitional housing, but knowing that we as a community are poised to lose a large amount of funds that can be applied towards permanent housing. How do we build those bridges for people to continue to sustain housing once they are stabilized through services? Open to any questions that the group might have.
Yes, I want to know, all of this money, what do y'all do when it's left over? Is there any left over, and what do you do with it?
So that's going to vary by source. If we're talking about federal dollars, any of the HUD programs, any money that's unspent at the end of our period of performance is recaptured by HUD. We lose that money. That's why in our local competition, we've really made one of our scoring areas of emphasis, how effectively a program spends their dollars, because we don't want to leave money on the table and have it recaptured by the federal government. For the local funding, there will not be any remaining funds for the Extended Social Resource Program. We typically receive asks or requests that exceed the pot of money that we have and dole those out on a percentage basis based upon score. For the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund, which is also local dollars, that's a closed fund. So if we have any money remaining at the end of the fiscal year, we would just move it to the next fiscal year and continue to spend those dollars.
Why not have the tent up all year?
So the tent is extremely costly. He's referencing our winter shelter. This year, that is a site-based temporary shelter using structures that are referred to as tents. They're fairly sturdy. They're clear span structures. They do have HVAC systems, but they're temporary. And anytime that you do temporary, we have to do things like install utilities, do site work to prep the area to make sure is the ground level, can it Can it accommodate these structures? And so there's a lot of costs that are associated with temporary projects that drive it up. We could definitely shrink some of those costs down with more year-round shelter available.
I'm gonna ask you one more question. I'm done. We ain't worth that. Human beings is not worth it all year.
Trust me.
Some of us is hot and some of us is dying out here in the cold. Some of us dying out here in the heat. We ain't worth that.
So I definitely advocate for us to have additional shelter resources, and I go to council each year to request this money. And if someone wants to commit more to me, I will gladly look at ways to extend those types of resources, but also build more year-round permanent resources. I think that's definitely a valid question and a valid topic of conversation.
I think it's a lot of the piece too of because I appreciate that too of why to a degree we're here in that we need something that's permanent that people can access year round. And so we want something that's more cost effective and the permanence rather than the temporary tent piece. So I agree with you. I think we just would like a more consistent structure. Yeah.
I had a question, Diane. I don't know if it'd be helpful for the rest of the committee, but I should know this and I don't. What is the number of like Lexington Housing Authority apartments that we have, vouchers that we have? Because one of the easiest ways to move somebody from these programs is the Lexington Housing Authority or any other program like that are permanent housing vouchers that are around and people can apply for. I don't know how many we have. You might not.
I would have it somewhere. I just don't know it offhand. Two things there. One, there are a lot of communities in which the public housing authority for the region does things like set a homeless preference to where they would prioritize those on the wait list that are coming from a homeless situation and move them to the top of the list. We have not yet been successful in getting a local homeless preference from the Lexington Housing Authority. The other thing is just keep in mind that some of the changes that are going on with HUD right now, they're also seeing a reduction in some of their voucher programs. So I can work on getting you some figures on the number of vouchers that they do have, but some of those may change as we move forward, and we might see that number shrink.
All right, thank you. Any other questions there? All right, seeing now, let's continue on. Just looking at the time on the clock here, it's 5 minutes to 4. We had 15 minutes slotted for the next conversation. We really want to get to these subcommittees. At about 45 minutes set aside for subcommittees to have that discussion. So just real quick, just looking at the peer cities and various shelter models. And we have a list there of cities that were identified by Charlie's team there, and just want to have some discussion more so around if there's any other thoughts around that list. And that will eventually fall into one of the subcommittees purview as well. But Charlie, you want to give us some highlight around that?
Yeah, I think you captured that well. I think our ask of the task force is, I think a lot of us would like to examine some peer cities, see who has best practices, who's doing things well that we may want to replicate, not reinvent the wheel. We've identified some here that we think that we're aware of that have both some good things that we would potentially want to replicate and maybe even some things we want to stay away from. And that's good for us to know as well. But in your packet, you should have a page that summarizes a little bit about what each of these cities has done. Our ask is, which of these would you like to hear more about and which did we not capture? Do you or anyone else know of a city that was something innovative or a specific project that you would like us to, at a future meeting, bring to you for a presentation? For example, we can do a whole presentation on what Louisville's doing, or we could even bring somebody down from Louisville, but we don't want to do that if that's not something the task force would think is helpful and productive.
Do you want those suggestions now or?
I think some discussion now might be helpful. Obviously, Abdul pointed out our time issue. We need to keep it to maybe a 5-minute discussion, but it would be helpful to us to go ahead and have some names and some information.
Well, I'm not positive if it's in the EHI report. You know, is it Halifax, Minnesota? You all know this. There's a whole, Hapen, what is it?
I think it's Hennepin, which I think is Minneapolis, isn't it?
That is the one. If you all look at how they did flexibility, how they've been able to grow out and how it can flex back when not needed, it's unbelievable. And there is a documentary on it. So you might not have to go up there or have them come here. But yeah,
If you run across that, could you send it to me?
I can send it to you. Yeah. In fact, we've got a lot on them.
I will say, when I looked at these, several of these are being built. They're in process versus, so there's not really any lessons learned from them. It's aspirational ideas. So I would like to see things, like if there's ones that are working, and I'm sure they're not perfect because this is not this complex problem. So maybe Jeannie's, I know Phoenix is like had bunches of people forever. I don't know if they're a good example, but it would be nice to know what other cities are doing and have been dealing with this for a while, if they think they're doing something that's working. So that was the only thing I thought about when I looked at this.
Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for recognizing me. So Fish and Loaves, Sacramento, California has the best homeless model that I've ever lived in and studied. And so they have a whole community right in the Capitol, right down by the Capitol with a city where your animals can stay. They have attorneys. I mean, they have the whole 9 yards. And so I'll just say Fish and Loaves and let you guys, and it could be Loaves and Fishes, but I'm pretty sure it's Fish and Loaves.
We'll find
And
it.
then I have a question. As a council member, as we were going through the fund balance, I had offered up a suggestion of $9 million is what I asked for a homeless project. We, in fact, hired Ed Holmes for $200,000 to do the study. Why are we not using the information that he's brought back? We did spend $200,000. And are we not recognizing the study that he did and the recommendation that he gave? Or is this
I think that was in, no, I
something
think that was
else?
in the first packet, I think. So that was in the first packet. So I think we just were giving so much information out in the beginning. And then I'm hoping when we break down in subcommittee, we'll go back and look at some of that data pieces. But no, I think you're right. It was really critical information. It laid it out really clearly.
And it was $200,000.
And it was, so we need to honor that.
$200,000. That's a whole lot of sandwiches.
I just wanted to add one thing. Last meeting, I believe I told you that I had been to the legislature and we had talked about the possibility of funding. And the chairman of Appropriations and Revenue highly suggested that we look at Bowling Green. I don't know anything about it. And that we look at Northern Kentucky. And I don't know anything about what they're doing, but I think it would behoove us to look at those since many of our legislators are familiar with them and they might offer a little piece of something that we could put in the mix. I don't know. So I would add to this list Bowling Green and Northern Kentucky. It may not be anything we think will work here.
So Northern Kentucky would have a low barrier shelter, which is probably why that's been pointed out to you. And we actually would participate in statewide networks, but we would have contacts there that we could definitely facilitate that.
Yeah, thank you. Because the whole idea of this is to lower the numbers of homeless folks, right? That's why I started this. We jumped up by 100 people. So if there are some ways out there that are different that we can put together, I think that might be worth looking at. Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
A couple of things along that line. I met with, several years ago, I met with the Northern Kentucky street outreach program, whose name is escaping me right now. But last year at the opioid abatement conference, I talked with the director of the low barrier shelter. So I'm pretty sure I have that contact information. And I was searching for the name of the group in Bowling Green too, which, but yeah, they have some good programming there in Bowling Green. I think they're a little more kind of spread out than what we do. So they piece out a lot of their services between, nonprofits and faith-based groups. And so it's a little bit more scattered out than some of the other places. But Northern Kentucky, I think it would be good. Their low barrier shelter is much smaller than what we would need, but they do have they started out as that being part of their regular shelter and then expanded it into a sort of an existing or sort of a freestanding low barrier shelter. So they've tried a couple of different models. So would probably be a good resource for what's worked and what's not worked in their area. And also just another point, I think we need to look at the bad ideas as well, because there are plenty of communities that have tried very expensive things that have failed. And we need to take a look at some of those too, as we're thinking about what could work in our community, just to avoid making some costly mistakes on our own. And also just looking at what exists within our own shelter system. How many beds do we have in our shelter system? Is there the capacity for expansion in those places? What populations would those serve? So I think there is a larger discussion along those lines for, what do we already have and can we kind of improve that system as well? So.
And Mayor, Wayside Mission, it might have been in the first packet, but just somebody with real life experience, Wayside Mission in Louisville, Kentucky, bought that hotel. The top floors are where people can come in and rent spaces, but the bottom is the Wayside Mission homeless shelter, and they are the housekeepers, they're the groundkeepers. They run that whole hotel, the restaurants, and then they live downstairs. So the homeless folks in Louisville has a place to sleep in. So they have really turned it over so much to look into that, just in case it's not on the first page.
That's a former hotel, isn't it?
It was.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yes.
So great commentary. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead 5 minutes after 4 and transition to the last bullet point. And Diane is going to walk us through what the subcommittees are and what all that looks like. Probably would cut that back a couple minutes in the deliberation time, because we really want to hear back from everybody at the end. So Diane.
Sounds good. So as we were talking and we were kind of listening to the information, and we just sort of broke it out, what we thought naturally went into these subcommittees, but we definitely want your feedback if you think that there should be another topic that's in there, but we don't want so many subcommittees. So our thoughts were supportive services and prevention services. One part that I'd like in the conversation that we were just having, is how we bring in, whether that's, one thing that I think is dear to Lexington is town and gown conversation. So is there any kind of pieces that the local universities can do? But also we have a strong commerce and business. So prevention pieces, even when I was looking at my page, my handy dandy page, but just as an example, if you work made $12 an hour, 40 hours a week, you would make $1,900, but you would only have $500 left over to live on rent. So it's not a livable piece. So we need to start thinking of prevention pieces beyond just shelter. So anyways, just that. So supportive services, prevention services. The next one we thought was funding and who our partners could be in looking at funding. So it's not just all the mayor's responsibility and councils, but who else can we look to for funding support? Next, we wanted to look at peer cities and shelter models, which was a little bit of what this conversation was. So who would really like to kind of deep dive in bringing recommendations back to this task force to some really good examples? And the next is community engagement. How are we bringing other people into the community around this issue and this conversation? And how are we sharing the work that we're doing? Because a lot of people are very interested in this topic. We're not always the best at sharing information that's being done here, but also how do we bring other people into the fold? I think the faith community is always looking really strongly into being a part of the solution. So as an example, neighborhood associations, there's other organizations. So with that, we have put up on the walls the committees. We have the funding partnership one over here. We have peer cities over here. We have community engagement over here. Where's my finance or supportive and prevention services here. So I think what we'd really like for you to do is kind of think of yourself, like, where is your expertise? You might be really curious about something, but not have any expertise in that area. We really want people to go to the committee that is their expertise and that they can bring something to that conversation. If you can go, we want them to huddle there, right? We're wanting them to go to that. So you're going to go to that space, and we're going to kind of make sure that it's evenly sort of sorted out. So we don't have everybody in the shelter and nobody in finance. So we want to make sure we have that. And then we do want to make sure that there's somebody who can be sort of setting when your next meeting is going to be, because you're going to be meeting outside of this task force. It has come to our attention that the meetings do have to be made public, so you cannot have them at your home. They need to be at a public place. And Tiffany needs to know ahead of time so she can put out that this meeting is taking place and we can get that information out. But with that said, is there any topics that I'm not mentioning or that we're not mentioning that you think should be part of committee work?
Yes.
Yes.
Where would we put our students and youth? Because that's a whole nother arena right there, and their families
Students and youth who need shelter.
that
Well,
are experiencing homelessness. Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, in my mind, it would be, because I'm hoping that we realize that our shelter needs to meet a varied community. So it would either go in peer cities and shelter, or it would go in prevention pieces, right? So you'd be doing both, hopefully. Yeah, sorry. Do you think it needs something separate? Because I could argue we could do that with every community, you know? Yeah.
I mean,
Please.
if you separate, for example, with the Salvation Army, they take women and children. So are you thinking you would separate children out, or what are you thinking?
I'm thinking more since the definition is a little bit different, and the challenges I think are a little bit more engaged as it is around education, their educational support with that. So like there's like Salvation Army is very limited on single dads. I know last year we had a lot more single dads. So then how do we help that population? We now have a growing population of grandparents and relatives raising kids. We have several of our families that we've been working with are disabled and trying to raise those kids and are homeless. And so I'm thinking about that, looking at that population and what do we need? Like, for example, I'll give you some of my data. We currently have 655 students that are experiencing homelessness. 99% of those is because of economic hardship. So what areas do we need to work on that hardship for them?
Jeff, when we do our count, we count everybody we find, correct? Or do we just count adults? I mean, I did a count. I worked on the count last time and we didn't encounter any children, but
All right, there we go. So yes, we would collect that information on everybody. It's going to be inclusive of households that are adult only, adult and children, or child only households. We're going to collect that data from all of our shelters, transitional housing programs that are dedicated to this population, as well as those who are unsheltered. And so in the first meeting, we would have given a booklet that had historical data from the point in time count. All of that can be found there. You can kind of look across that to see how the numbers have varied over the years.
So TC, so debate back with me, because I always kind of like to debate. But I think that that's a little bit of the piece, right? So if we're talking about shelter services, if the community needs to respond, whoever's in that committee and then the task force eventually needs to be able to make sure that we have services and shelter that fits those population needs, knowing that it might be single dads, knowing that it might be couples, because we don't have many shelter services that take couples, families with children. We're underrepresented in that. So I think, and people with disabilities, that's a difficult thing. You know, if you're looking for a shelter with somebody who's in a wheelchair, that is hard pressed to find, which is sad. So I think who's ever in those committees needs to make sure that they're looking at the varied groups of people that are accessing services. And we also need to be looking at prevention so we don't have children that are experiencing homelessness. That's my piece. Because then I think we'd have a committee for domestic violence, and we'd have a committee for senior, and then we'd have a committee, you know, so I don't know, but please
When I
debate
was
that.
looking at the list, I was like, okay, so where's my best fit? Yeah, where's my best fit?
So one note, as far as the subcommittees go as well, the members will be made up of members on the task force, but we are asking that the advisory members identify one of the subcommittees to be attached to in a supportive role. All the subcommittees are open to the public, and also one note that they can be virtual as well. So if you can't identify a public space, they can be virtual, but we need to know that up front so that that virtual piece, whether it's Zoom or whatever, is still open to the public. So just to make a note there.
Are
Other
there
than-
chairs identified for the subcommittees?
Good question. No. So
Yeah, it's purely volunteer, but we are comfortable assigning. So be careful. If you can't come up with a decision, we're comfortable with it.
and you do that by doing
So any other topic that you think we're not covering? Because if not, we're going to send you forth to go stand by your giant Post-it and kind of work out those pieces. When your next meeting would be, who would be kind of the chair of the committee? Good. All right. Carry on.
And those are Post-it stickies on the wall, so if we need to move them to a more convenient location for you to gather, they can definitely be relocated.
Back in. Please bring your sheet with you that you wrote on.
Honor to meet you. Nice to meet you as well. I'm so glad you made it. All right. Didn't want to let you down. I went to the government building first, so sorry for the tardiness. Oh, no, it's okay. Right. I'm just glad you made it. And you found your seat? Your tent card? It's my best. Oh, okay. No, I know, bro. I know, bro. She's like everybody's pastor. Always preaching. Yes, she is.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for taking the time to identify something that you think you're passionate about that will be effective for the task force. At this point, we want to take 3 minutes per subcommittee to just kind of give a brief feedback on what you all came up with. If we would ask and start with the chairs, and I know one of the committees has a co-chair, let's start with supportive, support. Supportive services and prevention.
All right. So my partner in crime is Danny. So I think our primary goal is going to be prevention. And so this is our team. We've already got our date and time when we're going to meet. And so we're going to be brainstorming. We're going to be looking at some data. Oh, sorry. So we're also going to be, we talked about our incomers, what's the root cause of our homelessness, but our primary goal is prevention and services, supportive services. So we are going to meet January 5th, 11 o'clock at 701 East Main Street.
Fantastic, thank you. And next up on the agenda is community engagement. There you go. Our co-chair, Ramsey. Miss Ramsey. You want to do it from there? Can you see it from there? Yeah, there you go.
I can't. Yeah, good enough. Okay. First of all, we are maybe the smallest of the groups, but we're going to have a loud voice. Let me tell you. No, we talked about the need to have the community involved from the beginning. Place to be able to share the good news and the work of this task force and to get community input. So, Chuck, who happens not to be here today. Yes, he did. Now, come on, Mayor. You know, you don't show up for a meeting. You get. And actually, she did check, and he was willing. I told him I'll text him when I get home, but no, he's agreed. So what we'll be doing is doing some of these virtual, and we'll be doing some in the community. We're doing a what is that called? You're doing the doodle poll to get when we get to meet just chat with each other the first time. Then on when the first Wednesday of January, we will be meeting, and we will know then. We'll know before then where it's going to be and who, so that the community can be involved. That will be more in person in our thoughts at this point. So it's basically about getting the community on board, answering questions. I've lived through this for 27 years. And Miss Sally, you would also agree, if we don't keep the community involved as we're moving along, it sometimes can be disastrous. And yeah, she knows. But this is not just for information for the community, but also the community's input. I think that covers it. You think that covers it?
I think so. Yeah.
It does.
The only thing I would add to that is that we did, discuss the importance of not just getting feedback from those that are impacted, but even the business community, trying to get their buy-in, because there's opportunities there, right? If you bring in the business community and they see that we're making great strides towards trying to address this issue, they may become employers of those that are right at the cusp of being homeless, right? So this is a holistic view from a community standpoint. Thank you for that. Next on the agenda is funding partnership. Who's identified as a chair there? Any chairs? Is it rock, paper,
I'm going
scissors
to take some
there, or-
responsibility for this. I told
Okay.
them they didn't have to because they could pick one at their next meeting.
Oh, man. All right. Charlie.
But our group had a great meeting, and we will meet on January 7th, 2025 or 2026. Sorry, that's wrong. At 10 a.m. at Holloway Feed on Loudon. I don't want to speak for the group, so I won't say too much about what they talked about, but we talked about analyzing other current funding sources to look at what funds our shelters currently from perspective of making sure that we're not funding things. Sally had a good comment about making sure we're not funding them $100,000 at a time. And so instead of 2 or 3 really good, effective initiatives, we have 20 underfunded, small and not very effective initiatives, that kind of thing. And then we also talked briefly about engaging the business community, because kind of like the community engagement group was saying, you need their buy-in. From our perspective, we were thinking from funding, but also, both of those are important. So, thank you.
And then the last but not least, the mighty peer cities and shelter models. We have 2 co-chairs. I'll let the 2 co-chairs represent.
Oh, I guess he doesn't have anything to say for a change. So we are going to send out a doodle poll to see when folks can meet. We're going to do most of ours virtual. We're going to try and see if there are any available unoccupied spaces that we may be able to be used for a permanent shelter. We're also going to see if there's any LFUCG owned spaces that we may be able to use. We're going to look at videos and websites and hear personal testimony of folks who've already seen some of the sites that are on the list. And then we're going to work on the policy that's going to govern these types of shelters, just so we can make sure everybody's on a level playing field. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
I
sorry.
was just trying to identify the co-chairs.
Well, I think there was really good work. I love this meeting actually, because it was really good. There was really good brains in the room last time, and we didn't give the brains any time to talk last time. So really glad we were able to kind of break up. And then there's some ad hoc folks and some of the advisor folks that were on all the committees. There's a lot of real wealth of information and passion around this. So I think, unless anybody else has anything else to say, I think we can adjourn for the day. You all know we are meeting in January. Your committees have a plan of when they're meeting or how they're going to figure out when they're going to meet. and we will see you the second Wednesday at 3:30.
And just one quick thing for everybody. Anyone can attend and participate in any of the subcommittees. So if you're on one, but you'd still like to attend any of the others, you're certainly welcome to. And we'll make sure you all have the schedule for all of them and not just yours.
I was gonna say that. Yes.
Yeah, there's no reason, for example, that Jenny couldn't also come to the,
No,
one of the other committees.
that wasn't our big question. Our big question is how are we getting it out to the general public? Do you all have a plan
There's
to
a
be?
process that we have to follow for notice on all public meetings, and we'll follow that. It involves posting on the city's website, and there's an email that goes out, and there's a whole process for that.
And can you do it through the general media also, since if people aren't seeing it on the website?
Yeah, what we may do is write up like a little press release that dates all the subcommittee meetings and just puts
Might
that
be
out there
helpful
for people to know
Can
about.
you post it in the shelters on a board or something?
Well, we can send it to them, and then
Yeah.
it'll be up to them whether they print it out and post it. But yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
And I did want to say that I will make sure that each subcommittee has each other's contact information. I know that you all just kind of wrote it down today, but I'll take it back and I will make sure that I email the funding group and include everyone in that group in that email so you can then communicate amongst each other. Yes.
So I need a motion to adjourn. One more comment, one more. Yes, yes.
Last time I forgot to ask this.
They should be able to validate.
Or it's your donation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, fair. We don't want anyone to pay. Yeah. Thank you, TC. Second. Lovely. Thank you, Amy. Amy.